So, among the birds and beasts of Tolkien's Legendarium, there are no shortage of awesome characters. We have Shadowfax of the Mayoras, Huan the Wolfhound, Bill the Pony. But when it comes to the great animal heroes, I do feel like the eagles exist in a class of their own. Ala Tulia Meldonia Aharamari essay. My name is Rainbow Dave, and welcome to another Tolkien lore video. So, I'll start with this. What exactly are the eagles? It's a good question, and it's one that Tolkien seemed to change his mind on more than once over the course of discovering his Legendarium. In the Professor's earliest writings, the eagles seem to be Maya spirits in the shape of hawks and eagles. But this simple explanation is challenged by what he wrote in The Lord of the Rings. In the final book of that story, Tolkien tells us that Gwy Here the Windlord and Landroval his brother were the greatest of all the eagles of the north, mightiest of the descendants of old Thorindor. But if the eagles are Maya, then they shouldn't really have descendants. We know that the Maya are offspring of Ilúvatar's thought, and so reproducing amongst each other seems impossible. Now, there are two exceptions. Both Melian the Maya and Ungoliant did have daughters, but their offspring were fathered by incarnate beings, and so they weren't fully Maya children. Also, we don't know that Ungoliant even was a Maya. And without wanting to overthink the mechanics of how giant eagles reproduce, I'm just not sure how a being as vast as Thorindor could really copulate with, a regular-sized eagle. However, Tolkien does provide a second explanation, and it's one that actually makes the great eagles even more cool. So in the second chapter of the Quenta Silmarillion, Tolkien explains the origins of the races of dwarves and ents. And we're told that dwarves were devised by Aule, the Valar of crafting, while ents were devised by his wife Yavanna, the Valier of nature and growing things. But although the bodies of dwarves and ents were built by Aule and Yavanna, it was Eru Ilúvatar who gave them souls and thus true life. And as a part of this deal between Eru and Aule and Yavanna, it was ruled that both ents and dwarves had to awaken after Ilúvatar's firstborn children, aka the elves, but they had to awaken before his afterborn children, aka men. So, I guess ents and dwarves can both be thought of as Eru Ilúvatar's adopted middle children. But the eagles? Now, they don't follow this rule at all. Because in the same chapter that explains the origins of ents and dwarves, Tolkien tells us that Manwë, the king of the Valar and the lord of the wind and sky, devised beings of his own, that also shall come to be by the heed of Ilúvatar. And before the children awake, there shall go forth with wings like the wind the eagles of the lords of the west. Now, what's fascinating about this line is that it explicitly states that the eagles existed in the world before the awakening of the elves. And this means that the great eagles of Manwë are the oldest of all the incarnate free peoples in Arda, which is a hell of a claim to fame for the eagles to have. But anyway, I feel that the most famous of the named eagles in Tolkien's Legendarium is, of course, Gwy Here the Windlord. Now, he is described as the greatest and the swiftest of the eagles of the Third Age, and he shows up 3 times in The Lord of the Rings to aid Gandalf. So Gwy Here's first appearance comes when he rescues his friend from Saruman's clutches after Radagast sent him to deliver a message to Isengard. Then, Gwy Here comes back for a second time to carry Gandalf from the peak of Ziraxigil to Lothlorien after Gandalf's death at the hands of the Balrog. And the final time we see Gwy Here is when he helps the wizard a third time at the Battle of Moranon. Now, when I first read The Hobbit, I assumed for a long time that Gwy Here also showed up in that story as the great eagle who carried the dwarves from Goblin Town to the Carrock, and then helped out again at the Battle of the Five Armies. I guess I just took it for granted that just as the unnamed elven king of Mirkwood is in fact Thranduil, I assumed that the great eagle must in fact be Gwy Here. But this is not the case. And we know this is not the case due to a line of dialogue spoken by Gandalf in the final book of The Lord of the Rings. After the destruction of the ring, Gandalf asks Gwy Here to carry him into Mordor and to rescue Frodo and Sam. And when he does this, he says, "Twice you have borne me, Gwy Here, my friend. Thrice shall pay for all." Now this makes it fairly explicit that Gwy Here is not the great eagle who carried Gandalf, Bilbo and the dwarves in The Hobbit, as that would make his rescue of Frodo the 4th time that Gandalf had ridden him. But we can speculate that the great eagle from The Hobbit could possibly be Gwy Here's brother, whose name is Landraval, or another eagle named Meneldor, who also joins Gwy Here and Landraval in the Battle of Morinnon. However, to be honest, my personal speculation is that the Great Eagle from The Hobbit is an entirely separate character, as we're told that he wears a golden crown and he calls himself the King of all birds. Now, none of the named eagles in The Lord of the Rings are ever described with such royal terminology. However, just because Gwy Here doesn't appear in The Hobbit, that does not mean he didn't do anything before The Lord of the Rings. You see, in the Grey Annals, which can be found in The War of the Jewels, we're told that Gwy Here and his brother Landraval were vassals of the Lord of the Eagles way back in the First Age. And alongside their boss, these two eagle brothers rescued the First Age heroes Beren and Luthien from Morgoth's fortress of Angband. Now this is a really cool detail because it brings Gwy Here's character full circle. So in the year 466 of the First Age, Gwy Here helped to carry Beren and Luthien away from the dungeons of the Dark Lord, after Beren had just successfully completed his quest to steal a Silmaril. And 6,584 years later, Gwy Here and Landraval once again fly into a different Dark Lord's domain, this time to rescue Frodo and Sam, just after Frodo had completed his quest to destroy the One Ring. So it may indeed have felt like a bit of a moment of déjà vu for Gwy Here and his brother. However, despite Gwy Here's fame as the Wind Lord, and his many contributions to the wars of Middle-earth, he is not the mightiest of the eagles, not by a long way. And I couldn't possibly make a video on this topic without mentioning the greatest eagle of them all. And his name is Thorindor, the Lord of the Eagles. So, Thorindor is the greatest of the eagles of Manwë, and whereas Gwy Here and Landraval and Meneldor become truly famous towards the end of the Third Age, Thorindor was among the mightiest of the Free Peoples way back in the First Age. Now, to be honest, I'm not even sure that Thorindor can be accurately described as a giant eagle. Gwy Here is a giant eagle. He's an eagle, and he is giant. But Thorindor isn't just big, he is truly colossal. In the shaping of Middle-earth, we are actually told that Thorindor's wingspan is 30 fathoms wide. Now, I'm no ornithologist, but I'm pretty sure that we don't tend to measure living things by the fathom. 30 fathoms is about 55 meters. That's 180 feet. Thorindor's wingspan is about the same as the height of the Leaning Tower of Pisa, or roughly equivalent to the height of the Cinderella Castle in Walt Disney World. It's not that much less than the wingspan of a jumbo jet. Thorindor is immense. and he swoops into one of my favourite moments in the entire Legendarium. So, I don't want to spoil too much for those of you who haven't yet read the Silmarillion, but there comes a moment in that story where an amazingly awesome elven king fights a one-on-one duel against the Dark Lord Morgoth. And this elven king is a badass, and he manages to deal 7 permanent wounds upon Morgoth, which end up forever hobbling him. But to the tragedy of every fanboy and fangirl out there, this king is eventually slain. And because Morgoth is the absolute worst, he took the body of the elven king and broke it, and would cast it to his wolves, but Thorindor stooped upon Morgoth and marred his face. And to be honest, I think marred his face is a bit of an understatement. As I'm recording this, I'm looking at a picture of a real-world golden eagle, and I gotta say, their talons look brutal. A quick Google search told me that the average length of a golden eagle's talon is a bit over 6 centimeters, and their average wingspan is about 2 meters wide. So if we scale this up to Thorindor's levels, we can speculate that his talons would have been somewhere around 1.65 meters long. That's the same height as Napoleon. Imagine being Morgoth and having 8 human-sized talons tearing into your face. Imagine how insanely painful that would be. More so than anyone else, Thorindor utterly mangles and mutilates Morgoth right in the face. And Morgoth deserved every second of it. Now, there is just one more thing to say about Thorindor, because after the First Age, he does kind of depart the story. But in the final battle of the First Age, in the Battle of Morgoth and the Valar, when the Dark Lord was at his most desperate and most dangerous, he unleashed upon his foes the last desperate assault that he had prepared, and out of the pits of Angband there issued the winged dragons. For the coming of the dragons was with great thunder and lightning and a tempest of fire. Now, no one in Arda had ever seen winged dragons before at this point in the story, let alone a fleet of them. But Tolkien tells us that in this battle, well nigh all the dragons were destroyed. And this is because of the great birds of heaven and their captain, Thorindor, who fought the dragons in the air all the day and through a dark night of doubt. And when that night was over, and the sun rose again, the dragons were dead. Thorindor had won. And after this, we know nothing more about him. Presumably, Thorindor returned into the west with his master Manwë, and there, I imagine, he lived forever, as the Lord of all Eagles, as the hero who had led his people to victory in one of the most epic battles in Middle-earth's history. Now, I'm sure we've all heard it said a number of times that the Fellowship should have just flown on the Eagles all the way to Mordor, but as I'm sure you guys agree, this fundamentally misses the point of what the Eagles are. They aren't a taxi service, they're not beasts of burden, they are free peoples. They are the oldest of the free peoples, and they are vassals of the King of Arda. Although they're not mentioned as often as like elves or men or dwarves or even ents, the Great Eagles are an instrumental part of Arda's history. And in no small way, they help to bring about both Dark Lord's ends, and they finally brought peace to Middle-earth. So, thank you all very much for watching. I hope you found this video interesting. If you did, there are plenty more like it on the channel. But until next time, as always, my dear friends, much love, stay groovy, and Navaya Melanine.